moving to the admission of state's exhibits 1 through 9, which are the photographs that were taken by Roger Dean.
We have no objections?
We have no objections, Your Honor.
They will be admitted. Okay, anything further about this on behalf of the state?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Any further on behalf of defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time we move for a Rule 29 motion for judgment of acquittal. Your Honor, as to the felony 3 burglary charge, we believe it's clear that the evidence has shown that this house was not an occupied structure. The condition of the home was deplorable. There were no utilities that had been in existence since 2006. Everybody who testified said there was no way anybody could live in it. While we understand that a home is primarily built for the purposes of living in it, there comes a point where a home is no longer able to be occupied, and that is certainly this house. There may be an argument that it is a structure that has been altered in a way that makes it an occupied structure. What it was one day is not what it is today. The house was 100 years old. Nobody had taken good care of it. It was impassable, so the realtor, Janine Porter, says. So Helen Steins herself, her son, her son's girlfriend, everybody said there was no way anyone could live there. Your Honor, we would also ask the court to rule in Mr. Kraus's favor as to the theft and breaking and entering charges. Necessarily, the breaking and entering and the burglary don't go together. One is occupied, one is unoccupied. But regardless of that, we even heard Ms. Porter indicate that she told Jim Hart, the attorney who previously represented Mr. Kraus, that she didn't think Mr. Kraus had any ill intent, that everything he was attempting to do, she believed he was trying to help. He didn't have any ill faith.
It's up to the jury to decide, not Ms. Porter.
I understand that, Your Honor. I'm just moving forward at this time. So we would ask that the court find in Mr. Kraus's favor regarding the felony 3 based on the structure not being able to be occupied. We would ask that the court find in favor of Mr. Kraus as to the theft, and at least as to the felony level, there has been no proffer as to the value of the property that was allegedly taken. We don't have any value. So we definitely can't be above the felony value. We understand that the claim is that she's an elderly individual, but there's been no demonstration that Mr. Kraus intended to commit a felony while he was within that structure.
As you're aware, I'm an instructed jury on circumstantial evidence, and clearly if somebody takes property out of the house and puts it in their truck and goes away, a jury can infer that he had the purpose to deprive the other person of property. There are multiple inferences that could be drawn on these circumstances, and the fact that property may have been returned doesn't do anything to that inference. That inference can be made. It's the purpose at the time the property was taken and not a subsequent period of time. Any comment with respect to the occupied structure?
Judge, only I would point out to the court that from the evidence it sounds like she lived in this house for a number of years. Then in 2006 she left and didn't touch a thing. We're left with a house that's in the same condition as when she was living it, basically from the sound of the evidence. I can tell the court this is a house that she was living under these conditions, and it's a factual issue for the jury. It's a habitable structure or not. It was built as a house, it's a 5-bedroom house, it was maintained as a house, and ultimately it was being sold as a house, and that's how it was listed on MLS. So that's a factual issue at this point, and
Your Honor, if I may, I'm sorry, if I may respond.
But you want to talk me out of my decision?
Uh,
I'm going to grant your Rule 29 motion with respect to the occupied structure.
Thank you.
It's clear that there were no electric, gas, no utilities in the building. It's clear that it had not been occupied for a period of at least 8 years. And it did not appear to be presently a structure that could be occupied. And my staff attorney has graciously provided me a case called State versus State versus Anderson. It's out of the 9th District, Summit County, which says exactly what I did say, that if a structure has not been occupied, there's no services and what have you. Even though it is a residence, it can be an unoccupied structure for purposes of the statute, and that's 212 Ohio 3663. So that'll be granted. It'll be overruled with respect to the remaining counts.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, I'll bring the jury in, and I will ask if there's any further witnesses, and you can say you rest. And, at that point in time, we'll go forward with the defense case. Yeah. I told you about the pit, didn't I? But different levels are supposed to rise to the upper level.
It's like a dragon there.
Okay, please be seated. Anything further from the state?
Your Honor, at this time, the state would rest its case.
All right. I've had some discussions with respect to the exhibits that have been introduced into evidence. The state resting, the defense will now have the opportunity to go forward.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Excuse me.
Your Honor, at this time I would call Officer Mark Meislich.
Okay.
Thank you.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give the court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do, Your Honor.
Please be seated.
Good afternoon, officer. How are
Good
you?
afternoon.
Sir, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, I'm Detective Sergeant Mark Allen Meisler. I work for the Danbury Township Police Department. I've been employed with them going on 26 years now, since 1990.
Thank you, officer. Officer, you had an occasion to be involved with an incident arising at a property located at 653 South Lightner Road in Port Clinton, Ohio, on or about April of 2014, is that correct?
That's correct.
And would it be fair to say that your first involvement with that case was April 7th of 2014?
That's correct.
Now, you had a number of, you completed an incident report, is that correct?
That's correct.
And within that incident report, you had on a number of different dates, added further narrative to that report, is that correct?
That's correct.
Have you, prior to testifying today, had an opportunity to review your report through its most recent entry of April 7th of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. And are you satisfied that your report was made accurately?
Yes.
Do you believe there are any changes at this time that you would like to make to the report?
Absolutely not.
Okay. And in completing your report, did you include all significant and material information relevant to your investigation in this case?
That's correct.
So you didn't leave any significant and relevant information outside of the report?
No.
Officer, you as you mentioned, your first interaction was April 7th, 2014, relating to an incident that allegedly occurred on or about April 4th of 2014. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that interaction was with Miss Helen Steins, correct?
Correct.
And she was, to your knowledge, the homeowner of the property located at 653 South Lightner Road in Port Clinton?
Yes, for a while, yes.
Okay. And where did you meet with her, at the house or on station?
Station.
And in talking to Ms. Steins, you completed a narrative in relation to your interaction with her, correct?
That's correct.
And you indicated that through that interaction, she had indicated to you that some items were taken from her home and some items had been returned that were taken, correct?
Correct.
And she indicated to you that those items that were, well, she gave you a list of the items that had been taken, correct?
Yes.
And she also told you which of those items had not yet been returned. Is that correct?
To a certain degree, yes.
Okay. So that I don't want to mislead, what do you?
There were a number of items that were taken initially, and there were some items that were brought back. They were not identified as a whole. They were identified as there was mention of a box that was returned to the residence.
And the box that was returned to her residence was a white colored cardboard box, correct?
As it was reported, yes.
Okay. And it was also reported that those items were left outside of the home, correct?
By Mrs. Steins or?
Your report says, Ms. Steins then reported that some of the items, see below, were returned to her residence shortly after the offense, and that the same items were left outside of the home in a white-colored cardboard box.
That's correct. Yes.
Now, you've been present for the testimony of everybody who's testified thus far in this case, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall the testimony of Tabitha Loroff?
Yes.
Do you recall the testimony of Tabitha Loroff that she met with Mr. Kraus on April 5th, Saturday, April 5th, and that those items were physically given back to Tabitha Loroff?
I don't recall the exact date, but yes, there was mention of items being given back at that time. Yes.
Okay, and those were in a box, correct?
Correct.
You also indicate in your report that Ms. Steins told you that Ms. Porter may have inadvertently given a male subject, unknown at this time, permission to enter the property and remove items from it, correct?
That's correct. That was the information that was given to me during the initial stages of the investigation. Correct.
And this was the closest investigation and interaction with anybody to the actual offense date, correct?
Right, that was correct. That was right after it happened. Ms. Steins came in. It didn't appear she had all the information at that time that she needed to effectively complete a complaint report, or which needed for me to investigate further. But those were my initial interactions with Mrs. Stein at that time.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Sure.
So I'd like to show you what's previously been. No, you're fine. Yes, I think it's going to be Exhibit C. It's just as it's May I approach, Judge? Thank you. Sir, I'm showing you what's previously been marked Defendant's Exhibit C. Do you recognize that document?
Yes, I do.
And that is indeed your investigation report in relation to this incident, correct?
Yes, it is.
And that is the complete report, is it not?
It appears that it may be, yes.
What do you mean it may be?
Sir, I don't know. This is not the original report. This is a photocopy.
Okay.
I mean, the original report is archived at the station.
Okay.
So I don't know how many, depending, I noticed there were a lot of copies passed around today and whatnot. So I don't know if this is the original report.
Do you know what the original report said?
Yes.
Would you be able to look at that document if given time to verify that that is a true and accurate copy of the original that's on file at the state?
Yes, it appears as though it is, yes.
Okay. And that includes the incident all the way through, your investigatory notes all the way through April 7th of 2015, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. May I approach it in here? Well, actually, you can keep it. Where in your narrative, incident narrative of April 7th, 2015, did you indicate that let me rephrase that. At the bottom of that entry, you have a list of items taken and returned, and right above that, an items taken. You see that?
No, I'm not following what you're saying.
Okay, approach her. I'm sorry. It's your first entry of April 7th, 2014.
Well, the first entry,
Yes.
correct, okay.
Right below your narrative, there's a list of items taken, 1 through 3, and items taken and returned, 1 through 12. Is that accurate?
That's correct, yes.
And these are the items that you claim Ms. Steins portrayed to you on April 7th of 2014, correct?
That's correct. And on May 15th and on May 22nd.
Correct. Got a minute approach again. Sir, I'm now showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 10. Do you recall Ms. Steins reporting, testifying that she submitted 2 written missing item reports to you?
Yes,
And if you recall, her testimony as to that report was that that's what she gave you on April 7th of 2014, correct?
no, that's incorrect.
I understand why you're saying it's incorrect, because that list actually matches your investigatory notes of the list on May 15th of 2015, correct?
I'm sorry, 2015?
2014, I'm sorry, May 15th of 2014, correct?
That's correct.
But do you recall Ms. Steins testifying that that's the list she gave you April 7th,
No,
2000? You don't recall that?
no,
But you were present for her testimony?
yes,
I approach. Do you recall the testimony of Clay Steins wherein he testified that the wooden antique marbles were returned?
I don't know if that's exactly what he said. And who said that? I remember something about wooden antique marbles being returned, yes.
Okay, and that's listed on your investigatory report as still under items taken but not returned, correct?
Initially, yes.
Okay.
Right, initially, during my
Very well.
initial. Okay.
Judge, I'll ask the witness to be allowed to answer the question.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Initially, yes, that was the report initially that was returned. Again, when Mrs. Steins came to the office, it appeared, though, to me that she was there frantically. She did not have all the information as to what was returned at that time. So therefore, the notes which were received from Ms. Steins match that which is in my narrative concerning the items that were taken. Now, if they could have been recovered later, that would not have been printed on the 7th when she met with me at the station. Thank you.
Are you aware of what dates items were returned?
Yes, to a certain degree.
What dates, to your knowledge, were those items returned?
The items that were indicated on my narrative that I explained. I believe the 15th and the 20th, I'm sorry, the items that were taken or returned.
Returned.
Not the exact date, no. Because again, the information received that day really didn't tell me a whole lot, which I felt needed more investigation.
Okay, so you'd agree with me that at some point, whether or not before April 7th, 2014, the wooden marbles were returned pursuant to the testimony of a prior witness in this case?
I can't really say for sure or not.
Okay. Did anyone tell you at any date after April 7th, 2014 that any other property had been returned?
Yes.
When was that?
There was a date sometime after that, again, initially, when I was still gathering information, that some items were returned.
And where is that in your report?
That should be in the supplement 2 or 3. But if I may add, the items that were returned also did not match items that were also still outstanding and missing once they were returned.
So nobody ever told you the wooden antique marbles were returned?
Not that I recall, no.
You indicated that Ms. Steins reported to you on April 7th, 2014 that the subject involved was actually photographed, correct?
Correct.
And that those photographs indeed showed that person carrying a white colored box, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And you were even informed that it was her son, that it was Helen Stein's son's girlfriend, Tabitha Loroff, who was responsible for taking the photographs, correct?
That's correct, again, during the initial phase of the complaint.
You were also told that it was Miss Loroff who reportedly saw the same subject, an older gentleman, through an attic window holding a flashlight, correct?
That's correct. Again, during the initial stage of the investigation where not all the information was there in front of me.
But that's what Miss Steins told you.
That's correct,
Correct.
yes.
Did you find her to be trustworthy?
Absolutely. I've known the woman since I started working there since 1990. She's always been trustworthy to me. She's raised a wonderful family there, and she's always been at that residence, always.
You then, as you reference, indicate that Ms. Steins came back to visit you on May 15th, 2014, and updated her list of items that she claims were taken from the home, correct?
That's correct, which is not unusual. I mean, there's a lot of times, such as a storage unit, for example, someone will go in and initially find a few things, items missing, and then they'll dig and find more. So I didn't find that out of the ordinary, to be honest with you. It does happen.
And then she came back again on May 22nd, 2014, and gave you another list, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Did you ask to see these items?
The items are reported missing.
Yes.
If I asked to see them, then they wouldn't be considered stolen.
Okay, did you ask to see the items that were returned?
At that point, I didn't know any items were returned.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Specifically, any items that were returned.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Sure.
I'm going to show you your report again, what's labeled as Defendant's Exhibit C. Your narrative entry on April 7th, 2014. Did you not include a section which says items taken and returned?
Yes,
And you listed items under that, correct?
that's correct.
Did you go see those items?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Because it's not part of a, per se, I'm only concerned with the outstanding items of the theft that were still outstanding. We knew they were there, told her to hang on to them, so they would remain there.
So is it your theory then that if somebody takes something and brings it back, those items weren't stolen?
Not at all.
So they're still important?
Absolutely, they're still important, yes.
Okay, but not important enough to go see?
I frankly did not know where they were at the time. She did not produce them, nor did she bring them to the station.
You're an officer of the law, correct?
That's correct.
You do investigation?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to slow down, I'm sorry, sir. You are an officer of the law.
Absolutely,
And you do investigations?
absolutely.
And you ask questions in those investigations,
That's
right?
correct.
Why didn't you ask her where the items were?
She did not know where the items were. She did not report that at the time.
Then how did she know what was returned?
I don't know that.
And that didn't strike you as funny. I don't know where the items are, but I know what was returned.
Knowing where items are versus what exactly and specifically are returned would be two different things in my book. I mean,
How do you know they're returned if you don't know where they are?
because she told me they were returned.
So she knew where they were,
She did not tell me where they were, but she told me that some were returned in a box.
and you didn't ask her where they were.
They were left at the residence.
Okay, did you go to the residence and see them?
No, I did not.
It wasn't important to go see them?
Let's go on to something else.
Isn't it true that you found it necessary over a year later on April 7th of 2015 to go out and photograph the items that were in the box?
That's correct at that time because I was asked to do so
Who asked you to do so?
by yourself and Mr. Braun.
I asked you to go take photos?
You were there with Mr. Braun.
Did I ask you to go take photos, yes or no?
Mr. Braun said that you wanted to look at them. No, you did not ask me specifically
That
what you
would-
wanted to look at.
And that was on the date that the initial trial was scheduled on April 15th of 2015, correct?
That's correct.
Your entry says you went 8 days earlier on April 7th of 2015, so how did I ask you to go out there?
The date when we inventoried the items that were returned?
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Sir, I'm again showing you what's previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit C, your investigative report. Refer you to the last page, entry of April 7th, 2015. You indicate that you went out and took photos of the items in the box, correct?
That's correct.
And you're saying I'm the one who asked you to do that?
Mr. Braun asked me relative to your request.
Okay.
And yes, there to photograph the items that were there at the residence, but we also went out there that morning.
Okay. And when did I supposedly request this?
Around that time, around the time when they went out there.
Okay.
The prosecutor asked me to do something and look into further information, which is not uncommon. I do it.
Right. Isn't it true that your report on April 7th of 2015 actually says, on the above date and time, I met with Tabitha Loroff at her residence in order to interview her regarding the above investigation. During the same time, Ms. Loroff also pointed out a cardboard box which contains item reportedly taken from Ms. Stein's residence.
That's
Correct?
Yes.
And you actually say, after speaking with Ms. Loroff, she completed a 2-page written statement while I photographed and inventoried the contents, correct?
That's correct.
So Ms. Loroff showed you where the box was. She pointed it out to you, correct?
It was in Ms. Loroff's house, yes.
Okay. You had also previously spoken to Ms. Loroff on April 30th of 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And at that time, she indicated to you that she would provide you with a statement, correct?
Yes, verbal.
Did you find it significant to maybe have her do a written statement?
Again, that was during the initial stage of the investigation, so what I wanted to do was actually determine if there was enough further information to move further in the case. So therefore, a phone call was made to kind of move on, to kind of maybe verify what Mrs. Steins had told me. So that's the reason why I called her on the phone. But she's a very busy woman. It took her a while to actually meet with me because of her workload and my workload as well.
Sir, what's the purpose of written statements from witnesses?
To write down their observations, feelings, thoughts.
Wouldn't you agree with me that part of that purpose is also to record that as soon as possible, because over the passage of time, witnesses can tend to forget things?
That's correct.
And indeed, you've eventually, as we discussed, had her execute a written statement, correct?
That's correct.
And that was executed almost an entire year later, on April 7th, 2015, correct?
That's correct.
Ms. Loroff also told you, contrary to what Ms. Steins had told you, that she didn't witness the incident, correct?
That's correct.
She also told you that the only information she had was the information given to her by Helen Steins, correct?
I don't recall her saying that.
Your Honor, may I approach? So I'm showing you again what's previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit C, specifically referencing page 3, an entry of April 30th, 2014. I'd ask you to read the third sentence, starting with moreover, please.
Moreover, Ms. Loroff reported that the only information she had regarding the offense was provided to her by Ms. Helen Steins.
Thank you. May I approach you? So Helen Steins told you all the information she got was from Tabitha Loroff, correct?
That's correct.
And Tabitha Loroff told you the only information she had was what she got from Helen Steins, correct?
That's correct.
There was also some conversation with Miss Loroff regarding a Mr. Clay Steins. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And Tabitha informed you that Clay did not want to get involved. Do you recall that?
That's correct.
Did she mention why?
No.
Did you ask why?
No.
Who did Tabitha Loroff tell you was responsible for taking the photographs?
I believe at that time she felt that maybe Ms. Stein's brother had taken the photographs. Again, it was early on, and I don't believe she really knew who had taken the photographs, only other than what information she was maybe receiving at that time.
It was early on, 26 days after the incident allegedly occurred.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's the first time I was able to actually speak with her on the phone because of her work schedule and mine.
Did you ask her if she had had an opportunity to speak with other family members?
No. Other than Clay.
You told her at that point you didn't think her assistance was any longer needed, correct?
Again, from that point, yes, early on, until I was able to talk to others involved. So that day, from that day forward, it was not needed at that time. If it were needed, I would go back and talk. It's typically how I do things.
And you spent all of 5 minutes with her, correct?
I was on the phone with her for 5 minutes, yes. She's very busy.
You then had, excuse me, you then, on May 2nd of 2014, telephoned Ms. Steins and left her a voicemail, correct?
Correct. I left a couple of voicemails for her, yes, throughout the investigation.
What did you tell her about the investigation?
I don't recall. Typically, I will call, once I talk to someone involved, I will call the complainant back, or the property owner back, and just let them know how the case is progressing, where we are, check with them with any information that may have been updated or any information that could have developed. That is then recorded on the incident report.
So every time you talk to somebody, you call the alleged complaint or the complainant?
Yes. Yes.
And you put that in your notes?
It was either talking to her or not talking to her. It's in there.
So it'd be your contention that after each one of these entries, you would have an indication that you either called her or talked to her personally?
Now, Ms. Steins, personally, I said typically. However, there were some cases that I was unable to get a hold of her.
But you would have put that as you did here, where you said I telephoned and left a voicemail, meaning you weren't able to get a hold of her, correct?
That's correct if I leave a voicemail, yes.
Okay. So you just sometimes don't leave a voicemail?
Correct. If I can.
I'm sorry?
If I can't, if I cannot.
Did you ever try to call Ms. Steins and were unable to leave a voicemail?
Yes.
Okay. why were you unable to leave a voicemail?
I don't know, phone service, maybe it didn't go to voicemail, I can't answer that.
You then, on May 2nd, only 13 minutes after leaving Ms. Stein's, that you had nothing further regarding the investigation, contacted Janine Porter, correct?
On which day, sir?
May 2nd, 2014.
In May, that's correct, yes.
And Ms. Porter advised, well, let me go back. Why did you not have conversation with Ms. Porter until May 2nd?
Because after trying to obtain information from others and having a hard time getting a hold of people, it wasn't until May 2nd I was able to get everything together and actually talk to her.
So you didn't know who Ms. Porter was?
Yes, I knew she was.
Okay. And you knew she was the listing agent?
Yes.
And you knew that on April 7th of 2014?
Yes.
Okay. Had you made prior attempts to contact her?
No.
So why wait 25 days to try and contact her?
So at any given time, there are probably 5 or 6 cases, major cases on my desk at one time. What I do is I prioritize cases when they come in, as they come in. And at that time, I work for a very, very, very busy police department, and for the manpower we have, it's remarkable, actually, that we're able to get by. So I'm very busy, not making excuses. That's the truth. That's just the way it is.
So Mr. Kraus's case with a felony 3 and 2 felony 5s wasn't all that important,
It was very important, yes it was.
but there were other cases more important.
There were some, yes.
Ms. Porter also identified the subject involved on May 2nd as Mr. Kraus, correct?
On May 2nd.
When you talked to her on May 2nd, she identified Mr. Kraus as the subject involved.
Mrs.
correct?
Porter, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
And she actually informed you he was a real estate agent and auctioneer, correct?
Correct.
And she actually gave you the name of his agency, Prudential Stat Miller Real Estate Agency, located at 1212 Hull Road, Sandusky, Ohio, 44870, correct?
I don't know that she gave me that information.
Okay, well, where else would you have gotten it?
From the internet. I actually looked him up.
Okay, so after she gave you that information, you went and looked it up.
Correct, yes. I just had a name, that's all.
So at that point, you knew how to get in contact with him.
Yes.
Okay.
You're talking about Mr. Kraus?
That's correct.
Yes, and I tried.
When you talked to Tabitha Loroff on April 30th of 2014, did she tell you that Mr. Kraus had given her his business card?
No.
Did you ask if she knew who the person was?
Yes, she knew who it was.
And why is Mr. Kraus's name not referenced in your interaction with Ms. Loroff on April 30th of 2014?
I do not list suspects until I have all the information needed. I do not want to put anyone's name in a report that could be a suspect. Some of these reports are subject to, they're subject for insurance companies to receive. I mean, they are public record to a point. And I do not want a suspect's name showing up early on until I have definitive proof that they should be named a suspect. It just protects them, and I wouldn't want to be named in a report also that way.
So Tabitha Loroff had met with Mr. Kraus personally and had his business card handed to her, and that was less reliable than Janine Porter saying it's Steve Kraus.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
You say you don't put people's names in a report until you have verifiable information, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And Ms. Loroff had been given Mr. Kraus's business card with his name and contact information on April 5th of 2014, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And you met with her April 30th of 2014?
Tabitha.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. But you didn't reference Mr. Kraus in that narrative entry, correct?
Again, it was early on. It was early on in the investigation.
So what made Ms. Porter more reliable or credible than Ms. Loroff, who had his business card and had met him in person?
Well, it was a business card only, my thoughts. It was not a driver's license. It was not any identifiable, like there was not an identifiable photo attached. But at that point, though, I had Mrs. Porter, who actually had worked with Mr. Kraus, so she was able to then verify that it was Mr. Kraus that was involved.
But Ms. Porter hadn't actually met with Mr. Kraus and received the items back like Ms. Loroff had, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
You also indicate that Ms. Porter told you that Ms. Steins allowed Ms. Porter to give Mr. Kraus permission to photograph the vehicle as she wanted the same posted on the internet on eBay, correct?
That's correct. During the early on complaint, yes, the first complaint.
When does this investigation stop being early on?
After I was able to determine that there was a suspect and that I had cause to believe that there was a crime that was committed.
And so pursuant to your testimony, that would be May 2nd, 2014 when Ms. Porter told you?
Thereabouts, yes.
Okay. So none of the other narratives are going to be early on in the investigation, right?
With regards,
You just told me that you would consider it no longer to be early on based on what happened on May 2nd, 2014.
right, there were a couple reports that were printed, a couple supplementals that were done prior to that May 2nd, which I indicated was, that was probably the jumping off point at that point to determine to where we could go further and investigate further for charges, yes.
And what made that the jumping off point?
Because I had an identification at that point,
Just like you did on April 30th, correct?
but I had a more definitive identification. From
You had a verbal statement as opposed to a business card handed to you by the person who returned the items.
Again, I've seen business cards that, over the years, that have identified people differently than what their names are. So it was just a business
Did
card.
you
Anything could be printed.
I'm sorry, different than what their names are.
Right.
Did you take a quick minute and call the business card?
No,
Why not?
because I hadn't had enough information yet to contact the defendant to ask him about the crimes that were alleged in this case.
So you did then on May 2nd?
No,
When did you have enough information to contact Mr.
this
Kraus?
is after May 2nd.
When?
May, I believe, 22nd, yes.
May 22nd?
Yes, I believe so.
And what happened on May 22nd that gave you enough information to call Mr. Kraus?
I had the information that I needed from the subsequent interviews from both parties. Again, Ms. Porter being the most reliable and most important, to go ahead and call him and give him a shot at addressing the complaint and to talk to me about, what actually went on that day.
And again, you talked to Ms. Porter on May 2nd, 2014, correct?
That's correct.
And you had no other
I'm
contact?
sorry, on May 22nd?
May
22nd.
2nd.
I'm sorry, you said the 2nd, you said the 22nd.
22nd, correct.
You talked to,
You're on a minute, approach. Sir, I'm sorry, ma'am.
again, you talked to Ms. Porter on,
I said May 2nd.
thank you.
Madam Clerk. Again, showing you Defendant's Exhibit C, your narrative report, page 3. Sir, what is the date of that narrative entry? Is that May 2nd or May 22nd?
May 2nd, 2014. That was a call that was placed to Ms. Steins and a voicemail was left. Ms. Steins.
Right below that, there's another entry for May 2nd, correct?
Yes,
And that's the one that you talked to Ms. Porter, correct?
that's correct.
So you talked to Ms. Porter May 2nd, not May 22nd, correct?
I didn't say May 22nd, I said May 2nd. I attempted to contact the defendant on May 22nd, not May 2nd. 22nd.
I asked you when you had enough information to pursue the case, you said May 22nd. Is that incorrect?
May 2nd, May 22nd to talk to the defendant.
What took you so long to try to contact the defendant?
Again, it was a matter of putting all the reports together, putting the case together, just kind of thinking things through. I like to typically think things through because there could be some other mitigating factors involved, and I'm not in the habit, nor would I ever feel good about charging somebody with a crime that they did not commit. So I really typically take a hard look at that and decide where I'm going to go. And again, caseload has a lot to do with it also.
So when you made that determination and did that mental thought process, you had 3 interactions: April 7th with Helen Steins, April 30th with Tabitha Loroff, and May 2nd with Janine Porter, correct?
That's correct.
And what from those 3 interactions, after you thought about it, gave you the inclination to pursue the case further?
Mrs. Steins reported a crime, a theft. Tabitha confirmed what Mrs. Steins had said relative to who was possibly involved, the date of the incident and whatnot. Again, initially, this was all initial information. And then Mrs. Porter also confirmed their information on the 2nd and also gave me a suspect from which to entertain an interview.
Ms. Porter also gave you Mr. Kraus's cellular telephone number, correct?
I believe she did, yes.
Were you aware at the time that the house had actually been sold and transferred ownership on April 24th of 2014?
No.
Does that have any bearing on your investigation?
No.
So the fact that items are missing and you're given items missing lists on May 15th and May 22nd, 3 and 4 weeks after the house was transferred, doesn't have any bearing on your investigation?
Not necessarily, because those are the items that were reported missing during my initial interview of Ms. Steins, the property owner, on April 7th.
You're telling me that the items listed on May 15th and May 22nd are the same items that were missing on April 7th?
Right, that was just, it appeared to me as that was just an inventory list in addition to what was already missing from the residence, which she initially reported that day on the 7th, correct?
Say that again?
The 2 supplemental lists, as I said before, okay? They are, typically, someone will find more things missing. It was my impression at that time that Mrs. Steins came forward with 2 other lists in addition to whatever was taken on or about April 4th, April 7th in that area, in addition to what, again, was reported initially. So the items were still owned by her at that time, and they would have been owned by her when she came in at that time because she reported them as her property missing.
So why wouldn't she have had everything on May 15th? Why would she need to come back May 22nd? The house had already been transferred.
Can't answer that question.
So you find out April 30th from Ms. Loroff and May 2nd from Ms. Porter that they believe it to be Steve Kraus, correct?
That's correct.
And you, despite testifying that you called him May 22nd, you called Mr. Kraus on May 20th, correct?
No, called him on May 22nd.
Your Honor, may I approach? Sir, again, Exhibit C. Defendant's Exhibit C, page 4, the first entry. What is the date on that entry?
Okay, there were 2 calls, May 20th.
Sir, what was the date of that entry?
May 20th.
And would you agree with me, it says on the above date and time, I telephoned Mr. Stephen M. Kraus.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you tried to contact him May 20th, correct?
That's correct. And I talked to him on May 22nd as well.
When he called you back.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's when I talked to him.
Okay. So my earlier question when I said, when did you attempt to contact him, and you said May 22nd, that was incorrect.
I misunderstood. Yes, it would have been May 20th.
You had conversation with a Roger Peen on or about July 15th, 2014, correct?
That's correct.
Why did you have conversation with Roger Peen?
Because I knew in fact that he was the one at that point that had taken the photographs.
When did you find out he was the one that took the photographs?
I want to say May or June, right in that area.
So why did it take you a month or two to contact him?
Mr. Peen, I tried several times, several visits to the residence. Mr. Peen was never there. I was actually coming back from another appointment. I noticed his vehicle in the driveway, and I stopped. Lo and behold, he was there, so I was able to talk to him at that time.
Did you ever leave him voicemails?
No, I didn't have his phone number at that time.
Did you ask anyone for his phone number?
It was not, yes, I asked, it was not given. No one really knew Mr. Peen's phone number.
So July 15th,
Just a second.
I'm sorry, Judge.
Can we approach the bench?
Yes, sir. Sir, on July 15th of 2014, after speaking with Mr. Peen about the pictures, you indicated that the above investigation was now completed, correct?
Correct at that point, yes.
And that it was going to be forwarded to the Idaho County Prosecutor's Office for the consideration of criminal charges.
That's correct, that's typical.
Okay. And what happened after you submitted that case to the prosecutor's office?
After I dropped it off at the office, I have no idea.
Were you ever contacted regarding the case again?
Yes,
By whom?
a number of people. Mr. Mulligan being one of them.
Okay. Were you advised whether or not charges would be brought?
Typically in cases like that, they are direct grand jury cases. So therefore, the grand jury makes a decision on charges. So no, the charges weren't specified at that time. They weren't labeled and listed each individual charge. It's up to the grand jury. So we just send the report to the grand jury and let them decide what charges are applicable to each case.
Was this case sent to the grand jury?
Yes,
When?
I believe in October.
October.
Strike that. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know the exact date when it went to the grand jury.
How long do cases typically take to, once you drop them off, to go to the grand jury in this county?
It's hard for me to say. It could be weeks. Sometimes they'll have one grand jury a month. Sometimes they'll have two or three, depending again on caseload. Sometimes in the winter they've gone months actually without having many cases to present to the grand jury. So to answer your question, I really can't say particularly.
Do you know if there were any grand juries later in July or August or September of 2014?
No.
Is the summer months here typically busy because it's a vacation area?
I can't speak for anyone outside of the jurisdiction of the Danbury Township Police Department, but for me, yes, extremely.
So there's usually a lot more crimes during that time of the year than the winter.
Typically it's nationwide, yes.
Typically, I'm sorry.
Nationwide, yes, that seems to be the trend.
Okay. So you think it went to the grand jury in October?
Pulled my answer back. I really don't know, to be honest with
Did you have any more investigation before it went to the grand jury?
Yes,
Okay, when was that?
that took place in October.
And why 3 months later did you begin investigating again after you said your investigation was complete?
My investigation was complete. Now, when the cases are sent to the prosecutor, there is a time for some back and forth in that if a prosecutor feels that something might need to be checked, it's always good to have two eyes looking at one thing. There might be something I missed. If the prosecutor is typically asked me, hey, go out and do this, go interview this person, go here, and obviously I abide by that in order to put a case through, so.
And is that why you did so in this case?
Yes.
And who told you to do further investigation?
Mr. Braun.
Why was Mr. Braun now handling the case? As opposed,
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
you did further investigation on October 13th, 2014. And Ms. Porter told you that she had conducted a cursory walkthrough of the home. It was cluttered with a number of items and impassable, correct?
That's correct.
She also told you that she had met Mr. Kraus at a seminar and brought up to Mr. Kraus the possibility of an auction, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And that the sale of items from the home could possibly take place at a later date, correct?
That's correct, without specifying items.
Without specifying.
Items. The particular items, yes, items,
Okay,
yes.
but items was plural.
Yes.
You also put in your report that Mrs. Porter went on to report that she was never able to telephone Mr. Kraus concerning the possible offer to sell the vehicle due to a thunderstorm that she and her husband encountered on their way back to Erie County, correct?
That's correct. That's when she was receiving the text messages that she did not answer because of the storm, which she indicated to me were a request for the defendant to get a hold of Ms. Steins, I believe after the fact, yes.
But she had already talked to him in person about it at the seminar.
I don't know, I wasn't there at the seminar.
But that's what you reported, correct?
I reported what she told me, but
Okay. When did you find out that David Heinzel had information regarding this incident?
it was right around October.
Of 2014?
Yes, that's correct.
Why did you not have contact with him until April 6, 2015?
I'm sorry, it would have been the April, it was the second time that, after talking to Mr. Braun, yes, that's when I went and talked to him. After the information I received, I did not have any definitive information at that time. I take back my answer. It was right around the spring of 2015, right before we went forward with grand jury.
It was in April 2015 before you went before the grand jury?
Right before, it's the information you have in the report there, in terms of when I talked to him. You gave me the date.
You talked to him on April 6, 2015.
In April of 2015, yes,
And when did-
springtime.
And the case had already been to the grand jury.
I don't understand your initial question.
You told me that you found out he was involved with the case in October of 2014, correct? Right before it went to the grand jury.
Thereabouts, it was right in there.
So why did you not talk to him until April of the following year?
Again, it was a request from Mr. Braun to talk to him. Information is typically, I mean, they'd use the word incoming, but it is. I mean, sometimes we get information that is not readily apparent at first, but then once we receive it, we act upon it. I mean, it's just typical. At that point, I didn't know that he had any information until I was asked to go out there and interview him.
During the course of your investigation, did you ever go in the house on Lightner Road?
No,
Why not?
didn't need to.
Did you ever ascertain whether the house was secured or not secured?
I knew it was not secured.
During the course of this case, did you become aware that Mr. Kraus was running for political office?
After the case had already been submitted to the prosecutor, yes.
Submitted to the prosecutor in July.
July, correct. Other than Mr. Kraus, other than Mr. Kraus being an auctioneer and realtor, which I found online, I really did not know much about the man. That's why I called him on the 22nd to find out and talk to him and get a better feel for him and see what
On the
he was.
20th?
20th, yeah, 20th, you're right.
Okay.
22nd, I talked to him.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Ron?
Detective, just briefly here. How long have you been a detective?
Been a detective for approximately 8 years.
You told me that, did you work patrol?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Is this case one of those situations where you're responding to an emergency?
No.
Why not?
Because at that point, during the initial report, I'll go back to the 7th, it was not reported as a break-in in progress, an open door, burglary in progress, theft in progress. It was not reported any of those. It was reported that it already had occurred, and it was basically just a reporting procedure at that point.
Okay. And so part of your job was just to talk to the witness,
Correct, yes.
okay? And you had to track people down,
That's correct, yes.
okay? And when we talk about that situation, was everybody in this case initially cooperating with you?
Not necessarily.
Some people didn't want to be involved.
That's correct, yes.
And you run into that passive-aggressive attitude where I just don't want to be bothered with this problem.
That's correct.
From the very beginning until now, who has pushed the case forward?
Ellen Steins.
Anybody else?
Other than the state, Ellen Steins.
I'm sorry.
Ellen Steins.
And during the course of this investigation, a couple of times, I told you to do things, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And ultimately you did what I asked you to do.
Absolutely.
And some of the things I asked you to do were go out and interview Jenny Porter,
That's correct, yes.
re-interview Tabitha Laurel,
That's correct.
get a written statement from Tabitha Laurel,
That's correct.
talk to David Heinzel,
Correct.
take some photographs of some property.
Yes.
And this is what happens on just about every case, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Prosecutors work with detectives, making sure cases are prepared for trial.
That's correct, yes.
Now, as part of your work on this case, you did go out to Helen Stein's, the house at 653, as well as Clay Stein's house, where you live with Tabitha Laurel, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And you took some pictures.
Yes.
I'm going to show you, first of all, what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 12.
Yes.
First of all, do you know that photograph?
Yes, I took the photograph.
Do you recall the date?
Not offhand. It would have been the same date that I met with Tabitha, the exact date.
April 7th, 2015?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, April
7th? Is that how the box appeared when you first saw it?
Yes.
Let me show you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 13.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us what that photograph is?
That is a photograph which I took of the contents of the box. I was able to actually remove the contents of the box. And I laid them out on the carpet to where I could photograph them individually with my assigned camera.
Okay. So that's everything that was in the box
That's correct, from what I recall. Yes.
that Tabitha Laurel, she told you she received from the defendant, Steve Kraus.
Yes,
And that's the contents as they appeared on April 7th of 2015.
correct.
I'm going to show you some marked as State's Exhibit number 14.
Okay.
Can you identify that for us?
It's an antique automobile, rusty. Photograph which I took of the same antique automobile parked in a garage, detached garage belonging to the residence formerly owned at this point by Miss Helen Steins.
Okay. Is that the 32 Chevy with the suicide doors?
They were claiming it was a 32 Chevy.
You don't know,
I don't know, no.
but that's the car in the garage at that property.
That's correct, as it was reported.
Were you able to get the car out of the garage?
No,
Able to get inside the garage and take a better picture of the car?
no.
Where did you take that picture from?
It was outside, there was an open window, glass was missing, so I was able to take only that amount of a picture of the car.
And here's the marked as State's Exhibit number 15. Can you identify with that?
Yes, that's the residence at 653 South Lightner Road, Danbury Township, Ottawa County, Ohio.
Okay. Does that photograph fairly and accurately show the house as you saw it?
Yes,
And what date was that taken?
that was taken, I don't recall the exact date, without referring to my report.
Was that also April 7th?
I would say so, yes.
And finally, let me show you State's Exhibit number 16. What does that photograph show?
This is the photograph of the rear door of 653 South Lightner Road, Danbury Township, Ottawa County, Ohio. This was the same rear door which was reportedly seen opening and closing by Mr. Peen, and where he determined and aimed his photographs to the same area.
Okay, so that's the door that Mr. Kraus allegedly entered the house from,
Correct, yes,
according to that witness.
yes.
Now, all these photographs, State's Exhibit number 12 through 16, do they fairly and accurately show what you saw back on April 7th?
Yes,
Now, counsel was asking you about photographs being taken and Captain Loroff being interviewed, did you get confused? Did you confuse that incident with a separate time when you, myself, Mr. Kraus, and Mr. Murphy, I'm sorry, went out to the house?
That's correct. That's what I thought he was referring to when he asked, yes.
Okay. You recall what date that happened?
Again, not without looking at my...
Would it have been April 15th of 2015?
That sounds about right, yes.
Okay. Now, Sergeant Meisler, as you were putting the evidence together on this case, it sounds like it took you some time to do that.
Yes, it does. It's typical.
Why is that?
Things just, they take time. Again, you have different voices involved, different people to interview. And again, the interaction with the prosecutor, I mean, it just takes time, getting everything together and everyone together. Yes.
Okay. No further questions.
Any further?
So you indicate that you went out to the house on April 7th of 2014 or 2015 to take the pictures that are Exhibit 12 through 16?
I can't recall it. It was, without looking at my notes, I really can't.
You can't tell even what year it was?
With which time? Which of taking?
Sorry.
No problem. So you were just shown, well, actually not those. These, picture of a car at Exhibit 14, 2 pictures of the residence at Exhibits 15 and 16. When did you take those photos?
2015.
Where in your narrative of April 7th, 2015, do you say you took photos of 653 South Leitner Road?
2015?
Yes, sir.
Where does it say in my narrative?
Yes, sir.
Don't have my narrative in front of me, sir.
Do you believe it's in there?
But thereabouts, yes, the dates.
Exhibit C, page 6, sorry, page 7. April 7th, 2015, you indicate you took photos of the items that were in the box, correct?
That's correct.
You made no mention of taking photos of the house, correct?
Of the box, yes, the contents of the box.
Correct, but no mention of the photos of the house, correct?
No, I believe it occurred at a different time.
Okay, so when did you take those pictures, sir?
There were some pictures taken of the residence on 4/6/2015.
So the day before?
Of the residence, yes.
Okay, so that's actually when those photos were taken?
They're about that time, yes. Yep.
Sir, you also indicated that you photographed this box. What color was the box?
Appeared to be brown at that time.
Okay, so that would not match the description of a white box that was used to return the property, correct?
Early on, when it was reported, the white box, there was a white box returned. The brown box was there to be photographed, so. It was a brown box photographed, reportedly a white
I'm
box.
sorry, it was a brown box.
Brown box photographed, reportedly a white box with contents returned.
You also indicated that anything you did on or after October 13th of 2014 was done at the direction of Tim Braun, correct?
Most, yes.
Was your activity on October 13th, 2014 done at the direction of Tim Brown?
Can't recall particularly what occurred that day.
And first once more here. Again, Exhibit C, beginning on page 5, entry dated October 13th, 2014. To attempt to assist in your recollection, that's when you talked to Janine Porter for the second time.
Yeah, that's correct, knowing that Mrs. Porter was re-interviewed on that day, yes.
And that was done at the direction of Tim Braun?
Yes.
On October 13th, 2014.
That's correct.
Are you aware Mr. Braun wasn't appointed as the prosecutor until Halloween, October 31st of 2014?
No.
And nothing further here.
All right. Any further? Do you recall when we first met to discuss this case, Sergeant?
The exact date, no.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'll call you next one.
Thank you.
Your name, sir?
Jeff Berquist,
Could you please spell your last name?
B-E-R-Q-U-I-S-T.
All right, step around there, please, and raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in court and jury, be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Sir, could you please tell us your name?
Jeffrey Scott Berquist.
Okay. And sir, are you currently employed?
I own Brookshire Hathaway Steppenwolf Real Estate as the broker.
Okay. And how long have you been the broker of that particular agency?
I've owned that brokerage for almost 30 years.
Okay. And was it previously known by a different name?
We have changed franchise names. It was Prudential Steppenwolf Real Estate. Prior to that, it was Century 21. Periodically, companies change franchise names or the franchise gets bought.
Sure. And what franchise were you affiliated with on or about the beginning of April 2014?
That was still Prudential Steppenwolf Real Estate.
Okay. And you were the broker still at
I
that
was the
time?
broker at that point, too.
At that time, did you know a Stephen Kraus?
Yes.
How did you know him?
He was a licensed real estate agent with me. I've known Steve from, he started taking classes in January of '09. I was one of the instructors. Prior to that, I knew him by using his services as an auctioneer. That's how we met. I said, Steve, why don't you get your real estate license? Most auctioneers carry both licenses now.
Okay. And where is your agency located? What's
My
the
office
physical
is
address?
actually on 1212 Hall Road in Sandusky.
Okay, and that's 44870?
Yes.
Did there come a time, do you know who a Tabitha Loroff is?
Yes, Tabitha worked for me when she was in high school during an EHOVI program, and then approximately a year and a half after that as a secretary.
Okay. And when was that? Roughly.
10 years ago,
Okay.
roughly.
Have you had contact with Ms. Loroff subsequent to that time?
Yes.
Did you have contact with Ms. Loroff in the beginning of April 2014?
Yes, she did call me and asked me if Steve Kraus was with my company. I said, yes, his real estate license is here. She informed me, she says, well, I think Steve Kraus stole some stuff out of a relative's house. I said, Tabitha, you worked for me for over 2.5 years. You know that's not the type of business or type of person we have employed. Let me check into it and see what I can find out.
Okay, and did you indeed check into it?
I called Mr. Kraus right afterwards and said, Steve, what are you up to? He said, I was out looking at a house.
Sustained. Don't answer that.
Did you asked Mr. Kraus what he was up to?
Yes,
Okay. And were you able to determine, did you gain knowledge of what he was up to?
he said he had
Let's,
taken,
Objection.
don't repeat, and let's not ask questions that they're going to have him testify to what Mr. Kraus said. You're not allowed to repeat what Mr. Kraus
Sorry.
said. It's all right.
Did you look into the incident any further?
yes.
Okay, and what did you do?
After talking to Steve, I then called Tabitha back.
Okay. And what did you do with Tabitha?
I told Tabitha that we would take care of that. If there's anything else she needed from me, please don't hesitate to call. If there was anybody I needed to call and explain the situation to, I would. If there's anybody I needed to apologize to, I would.
Okay.
I would come over and meet them personally.
Based on what you learned, did you come to an opinion of whether or not you thought Mr. Kraus had done anything?
I'm not going to have an answer to that
Objection.
question.
When you said you apologized, why did you apologize?
It's courtesy. When somebody feels that they're either had something done wrong or misunderstood, I grew up in an age where you say, please, thank you, and apologize.
You've been a realtor for how long?
Over 33 years,
And you've owned a brokerage for how long?
approximately 30.
Do you take unsecured listings?
If an agent came into my office and said that they have taken a listing where the building was unsecured, I would have to make a conscious decision to do one of three things. Either instruct the owner to secure the building, get permission from the owner to secure the building, or not sign a listing agreement. As the broker, I have to accept all listings.
Okay. And just for clarity, what does an unsecured structure mean?
Any building, any occupancy that a layperson could walk in and out of, the liability from a broker standpoint, the owner of a company standpoint is under our fiduciary obligations, I'm supposed to make sure that all assets are secure.
Do you ever deal with repossessions by banks?
Yes, we do with repossessions by banks, and the first thing a bank does is secure that building.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Mr. Braun?
Mr. Berquist. In your industry, how does one realtor examine the property that's been listed by another realtor? How is this supposed to work?
There's many variations. Sometimes a lockbox is put on. What a lockbox is a metal mechanical box that's put on the outside of the building with a code. These codes are changed periodically, so an agent calls and says, I would like to show your property at 123 Main Street. That listing agent would then give that agent the code. That agent would then go over, open the house, show it to his property, or do a pre-inspection. Many of my clients I pre-inspect for. Put the key back in, secure the building, leave the building in the condition that they found it in. Lights off, heat on, heat off. Simple.
Realtors are supposed to call each other before they go to do these inspections with potential buyers, aren't they?
There are agents that use a third-party service that you call. There are also agents that will actually put the code in the MLS. So there is not a definitive yes or no answer to that question, sir.
But particularly when you're dealing with a house that has not been secured, you would agree with me, that's a potentially, from a liability standard, a dangerous thing for a realtor to go in there without talking to the other realtor.
It would be unusual.
Not recommended.
I would not recommend it.
And you've taught classes in this area for a long time.
Yes, sir.
Now, Mr. Kraus works for you.
Mr. Kraus has his real estate license with me. His auction license is a separate entity.
I understand that, and I'm getting to that point.
Okay.
If he goes into a house to examine the house contents for auction purposes, that doesn't involve his real estate license, does it?
That's correct. It does not.
But if he goes into the house in order to examine, potentially to sell it or to auction it, it does, correct?
He could be there on both purposes, yes.
Okay. And some of the time he could drag you in inadvertently, and other times he's acting on his own.
That's correct.
And at this point, when Tabitha called you, you were pretty upset.
I was concerned.
Sure. This is your business. You've worked on it for over 30 years. You've built your reputation, right?
That's correct.
And this was a potential complaint against one of your employees.
Independent contractor, for clarification.
For clarification, independent contractor, but working under your direction.
Under my direction.
Nothing further.
Anything further?
Briefly. Sir, was, to your knowledge, was Mr. Kraus there in the capacity of a realtor as an auctioneer?
He was there as an auctioneer.
Had you and Mr. Kraus had a conversation about possibly auctioning off the property at 653 South Lightning Road?
Yes, he did. He asked
Objection,
me.
Your Honor.
Sustained.
Had you, as the broker of the agency, engaged in any activity in preparation or in relation to auctioning off the property at 653 South Lightning Road?
Objection.
Sustained.
How did you know Steve was there as an auctioneer as opposed to?
Objection.
I didn't even finish the question.
Well, every question you've asked is going to require him to relay something that Mr. Kraus told him, and I'm not going to allow that.
Had you done any independent research on the property located at 653 South Lightning Road?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and what was that research in relation to?
I pulled up the legal description, the auditor's card to determine the frontage and the current use of the property.
Okay, and what did you determine?
In my opinion, as a real estate agent that primarily does commercial real estate, I felt that the highest and best use would have had that rezoned as commercial property. 5 acres with 300 foot of frontage on a state highway is much more valuable than 5 acres of farmland.
Okay, and what would that have appraised at?
My opinion, that should have came in somewhere between 20 and 25,000 an acre.
Nothing further.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so-
Thank you. Your Honor, the next witness would ask not to be on camera.
Okay. Next witness does not want to be photographed.
Thank you, Judge.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear the testimony about the court and jury will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, please be seated. Keep your voice up.
Okay.
Thank you, Judge. Sir, could you please state your name for the record?
Kevin Francis
And where do you reside?
in Danbury Township.
Okay. And are you employed?
Yes.
Okay, and where are you employed?
I'm a chiropractor with Erie Shores Chiropractic, which I also own.
Okay, and where is that?
At Madison Street, downtown Portland.
Okay. Sir, have you ever had occasion to be at a property located at 653 South Lightner Road in Port Clinton, Ohio?
Yes.
And when did you have occasion to be there?
Wednesday evening, late afternoon on, I believe it was April 2nd, and then Thursday morning on April 3rd.
Okay, and what was your purpose for being there?
I saw the sign go up on my way back from lunch or on my way into work, I forget which, on Wednesday, so I stopped by that evening with my brother and kind of looked around and called my realtor, Brandon Fitt, and then we met in the morning and looked through the house.
Okay. When you say you saw the sign go up, what sign?
I noticed a real estate sign or something like that.
Okay. And what did you do? You called your realtor,
Mhm.
and what did you do after you called your realtor?
I called him and I just asked about the house, and he told me the price and some of the things about it, and it was very inexpensive. So we were interested in kind of seeing it and seeing if it might be something to purchase.
Okay, and what happened after that phone call?
He said he'd contact the realtor, he'd let me know. He did, he called me back, and then we set up a time to meet Thursday at like 8:30, 9 o'clock
Okay. And is that AM or PM?
a.m.
AM. And this is on Thursday, April 3rd.
Correct.
And you meet your realtor there?
Yes.
Is anybody else there?
My brother and my wife.
Okay. And what do you do when you're at the property?
We went around and looked outside, looked at the outbuildings. Most of them were kind of falling down, so we didn't go in any of them. Kind of peeked in where the car was, but Brandon told me that that was not to be sold with the property. Then we went inside and looked around inside.
Okay. So you actually went into the premises?
Yes.
And how would you describe the condition of the premises?
Like a bad episode of Hoarders. A lot of trash, a lot of moldy food, rotten fly traps with flies all over it hanging from the ceiling, cases and cases, hundreds of cases of Natural Light cans of beer, and hundreds of cartons of Marlboro Red cigarettes all over the house, filling up rooms, waist deep.
While you were in the house, did you have occasion to, did you go through the entire house?
We didn't go to the third floor,
Okay. Third floor being,
or the attic, or we went up onto the second floor. I don't remember if it was locked, but I know we didn't go up there.
okay. During your occasion of walking through the house, did you come across the gun case?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you notice about the gun case?
It was one of the first things Brandon and I specifically talked about it. My brother too. We enjoy hunting and things like that, so we were curious about the guns that were in there and if they came with the home. So we looked at them, but they weren't anything worthwhile. They were like BB guns and air pump rifles.
Do you know what caliber guns they were?
Well, the BB, whatever that is.
Sure.
There may have been a 22. I didn't really pay attention, but they were like cheap Walmart stuff.
Do you recall seeing a 12-gauge shotgun?
No, there was nothing of any. There were no good guns there. These are things that were worth less than like $50, $100 maybe at the most.
Okay, and this was 8:30 in the morning on April 3rd.
Correct.
One down here. Sir, while you were at the property, did you have occasion, did you take any photographs?
Yes.
And
Put them on the back. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
so I'm going to show you a series of pictures. I'm going to start with, for purposes of time, I'm going to start with 6. I'm going to have you look at these photos. They're going to be labeled, I'm sorry, 8 photos. They're going to be labeled Defendant's Exhibits O through V. I'd ask you to take a look at these. Can I approach right now? So I'm going to ask you to take a look at Defendant's Exhibits O through V.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start with Exhibit O. What, did you take that photo?
Yes.
What is that a photo of?
The fuse panel, it was all knob and tube wiring.
And is that photo a fair and accurate depiction
Yes.
of what you took the photo of?
Mhm.
Go to Exhibit P. What is, did you take that photo?
Yes.
What is that a photo of?
I believe it was a switch of some kind, an old style light switch.
Is that picture a fair and accurate depiction of the item that you photoed?
Yes.
How about Exhibit Q?
This is just one of the rooms. You can see the piles of trash.
Okay, do you know what room that was?
Not offhand, no.
Okay, did you take that photo?
Yes.
Whatever room it was it a fair and accurate depiction of the room that you were taking a photo of?
Yeah. It's a little dark, but you can definitely see the trash and everything.
And all the items in the picture were where they were when you took the picture?
Oh, yeah.
As to photo R, did you take that photo?
Yes.
And what is that a photo of?
Again, another one of the rooms. I'm not sure which one. This might be the stairwell. Yeah, I believe this is the stairwell.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the photo that you took?
Yes.
And as to Exhibit S, what is that?
That's the pile of beer cans and cigarette cartons.
And do you know what room that was in?
It was upstairs. I don't remember exactly which one, but it was one of the rooms upstairs.
How about Exhibit, and is it a fair, did you take the photo?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of what you took a photo of?
Yes.
How about Exhibit T? What is that a photo of?
I think this is the upstairs bathroom. There were 2 bathrooms, but I'm pretty sure this is the upstairs one. Bathtub.
You took the photo?
Yes.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of what you took the photo of?
Yes.
How about Exhibit U?
This was the downstairs room, if I remember correctly. We did kind of wade through some of the trash to look in the closet in there. So some stuff may have been moved in that room.
Okay. And you took that photo?
Yes.
And that's a fair and accurate representation of what you took a photo of?
Yes, it is.
How about Exhibit V?
This was the front room. You'd see this, actually, if you're standing right next to the gun case, basically,
Okay.
looking toward the west side of the house.
Okay. And you took the photo?
Yes,
And is it a fair and accurate representation of the photo that you took?
yes.
I'm going to hand you, sir, exhibits W, and just for people to follow, W through Z, as well as AA and BB. Can you tell me what exhibit W is a picture of?
This is the kitchen.
Okay.
The kitchen sink, which was full of stuff in the fridge, and this is where all the food was, and all kinds of wrappers and things of that nature, all over the floor and counters and things.
And did you take that photo?
Yes,
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of what you intended to photograph?
yes it is.
Exhibit X?
This is what you see when you first walk in the door, looking downstairs. There's a sign that says Den of Iniquity, leading into the basement, which it looks like they just had trash thrown down there for years. There's just piles and piles of trash everywhere.
Okay, and you took the photo?
Yes,
And the photo is a fair and accurate depiction of what you photographed?
it is.
Exhibit Y? What is that?
I think this was an upstairs bedroom of some sort.
Okay.
Just a rack of clothes, there's a door on the floor, and there's a oil can and some other things in there.
Okay, and you took the photograph?
Yes,
And it's a fair and accurate representation of what you photoed?
it is.
And exhibit Z?
This is a picture of the front room where the gun cabinet was, and then it's looking west into the front room as well.
Okay, and you took that photo?
Yes,
And is it a fair and accurate representation of what you photographed?
yes.
How about exhibit AA? What does that depict?
I believe this was the downstairs toilet.
Okay. And did you take the photo?
Yes,
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of the toilet?
yes it is.
And finally, exhibit BB, what is that a picture of?
The upstairs bathroom again.
And did you take that photo?
I did.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of the upstairs bathroom?
It is.
When did you take these photos?
That Thursday morning,
April 3rd, 2014?
correct.
So what was the lighting like in the house?
It was dim in some areas, but I mean, it was good enough that you could see.
Okay. Did you make an offer on the property?
Yes and no. Basically, when I talked to Brandon, I said that we wanted to talk about doing a land contract because we thought it would sell so fast, to see if we could start on something. And he said that she did not want to do that because she really needed the money as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Ask him what we talked about yesterday.
This morning.
Sorry, Judge. Sir, when did you, when were you first contacted in relation to this case?
Oh, yesterday.
Okay, and you were contacted, do you know why you were contacted?
Well, I mean, I knew that there was something about a Facebook post that I had made last November.
Okay.
That's what you mean.
But the first time you were contacted in relation to that Facebook post was yesterday?
Correct.
Okay. And you indicated that you had been to the property and were willing to come today and testify?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Mr. Brown.
Contact.
Mr. Murphy and Mr. Kraus.
Okay. So in the middle of the trial yesterday, they contact you to come into court today. Is that correct?
I don't know what was going on with the trial or what time it was. My wife told me after I saw patients toward the end of the day.
Okay. So you got, and this was something you posted back in October?
I believe, I didn't look, but I was told it was in November.
Okay. So this isn't something where you came forward voluntarily last night. They contacted you last night, is that correct?
Correct.
And you never discussed any of this with Sergeant Eastler
No,
or myself?
no,
Your name was not made available to the state in this case until this morning, is that correct?
well, I talked to them at like 8:30 last night, so.
Yeah. How'd they get a hold of you?
Called my office.
At what time?
It was later in the afternoon, but I don't know the exact time.
Okay.
We closed, well, my last patient was at like 6 or 6:15, and I called after that.
All right. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the events back on April 3rd. When you first went to the property with your brother, you didn't have permission to be there, correct?
When we were, yeah,
When you didn't have permission, nobody told you you could go on the property when you were checking the buildings back with you and your brother, did they?
it was a for sale sign.
I know, but nobody said you could go on the property, did they?
There was a sign that was for sale, and we pulled in the driveway and looked at the house from the outside, yeah.
Okay, and then when you went in the house, you didn't have permission to go in the house either, did you?
We went in the house with the realtor, so I presume he had permission.
You were relying on your realtor to get this permission, is that correct?
Correct.
You didn't know if he had permission or not?
Well, he said he did. He said he called the realtor and set up a time to go look at it on Thursday morning. So I assume that when he called the realtor to ask to look at the house, she gave him permission.
But that's an assumption you're making.
Sure.
Okay. When you checked the gun cabinet, there was what, 3 guns in the cabinet?
I don't remember the exact number.
410 shotgun?
I don't believe there was a 410 shotgun there, but
Maybe
I remembered air pump rifles and
Sure.
type stuff.
BB guns, air pump rifles, 22 Magnum.
No, I don't think so.
You thought maybe a 22?
Yeah, I said maybe a 22 like rifle, yeah, right.
You have to examine and tell the difference between 22 Magnum and 22 rifle, don't you?
It was pretty obvious they weren't worth anything, so it wasn't too
Okay.
big of an investigation.
But at this point, you don't know for certain what was in the cabinet.
I know there was not a 12 gauge there, and that whatever it was low caliber. I know that it was air pumps, so I mean, it probably wasn't a 22, but again, I didn't investigate it that much once I saw it was jump guns.
Who told you the 12 gauge was important in this case, sir?
It was mentioned in the, well, it was mentioned in the case all over the newspaper.
Okay. So, did you come in today because you were reading the newspaper, or did you come in today because you were talking to Troy Murphy?
I came in because they asked me to testify in the case.
And before you do that, you read the newspaper, is that correct?
Well, it's been in the news for a year. Yeah, I read the news.
And you read the coverage yesterday about the trial?
No, actually, I didn't.
Nothing further, Judge.
Any further, Mr. Murphy?
Just briefly, Your Honor, was the gun cabinet opener closed? I'm sorry. Sir, was the gun cabinet opener closed?
It was open.
Had you ever used a realtor before?
Yes.
And had you ever done showings before?
With him, yes.
Okay, and you always rely on your realtor to say that you have permission to be in the house, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, you may sit down. We'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess, be back at 3:15. You know the afternoon, notice how the case wants to solve.